Spanglishemos. Hi, mentors. Welcome to meeting 4. And so we're doing palabras more, palabras less. And this is part 1. And after the introduction, this is the first activity. So what we want is to translate these words either to Spanish or to English. Students will work probably in pairs. That'd be the best case scenario. And also the last 2 translations, choice of words, are totally free. So they can pick any word here in English and translate to Spanish, or pick a Spanish and then translate to English, these 2. So this is data that we're generating. And we're not so much interested in the words themselves, but in the numbers that describe the length. So they're going to write their length, the number of letters of each word, and then mentally find the percentage of increase or decrease in each case. So in each pair of translations. Of course, some words we know that have more than one possible translations, and that's okay. But hopefully we picked words that have a very, unique way of thinking, or a very famous translation that probably most students will pick. But if not, it's okay. It's just a different set of data. And it's just variety. Doesn't really matter. Anyways, they'll have freedom here to pick any word they like. So let's see how this goes. We have an example here, just so that it helps explaining milk and leche. So this is this pair of words in English and Spanish. The length is 4 and 5 of each. And then the percentage change here, it would be 25% going from 4 to 5. And from 5 to 4, it's not a 25% or negative 25%, but it's actually, you think if you have 5 things, you're losing one of these 5s, you're losing your 20%, right? So it's going to be a decrease of 20%. Let's take a look at the solutions. And also, if you're not too acquainted with Spanish, or it's not your, maybe native language, or you don't know, it's fine. You can still do this activity as a mentor. It's even more fun because kids can kind of teach you and remind you on how to pronounce these words and other variations, etc. So it's fun. Anyways, these are the translations. And here we notice that the lengths typically grow, right? 4 to 6, 6 to 9. Okay, here it didn't, but here it does, it grows, right? A lot, except for 2 cases, I guess, in this data. Let's fully see how to find the percentage change or the scaling factors. So students may first think that this activity is about how many more letters, and they would say +2 or -2. But then you have to think more about on relative growth, not absolute growth. It's not how many letters you grew, but relative to your old size. What's your new size? Is it double, 3 times, 50% more? Is it just 1.2? So it's relative to your size. And that's an interesting discussion that you can have with your students. And it's a very, important topic in mathematics. Relative growth versus absolute growth. What's the difference? Here from door to puerta, let's first go from English to Spanish to see how we could compute, or how could we find this percentage or scaling factor. Both are kind of equivalent, so they're just different ways to express the same concept of a relative change. So here the length increase, so the scaling factor has to be more than 1. The first way to think would be just which number I can multiply 4 by to get to 6. And students could just say 1.5. It works, right? If I multiply 4 by 1.5, it's kind of 4 plus a half. So 4 plus 2, so 6. So it's growing by, it's not doubling, but it's growing by 50%, kind of in the middle. Another way that you could teach your students is, and this is always going to work, it's divide by 4 to get to 1. And 1 is very nice because once you're in 1, you just have to multiply by your goal, which is 6. So you get 6. So if you do it as a 1 step, it's 6/4. So that's the scaling or the multiplier. Namely, if you do 4 times 6/4, it's just by design, right? Going to be 6. You're going to get 6. Another way is similar, but dividing by 2 and multiplying by 3. You get an equivalent fraction, it's the same. And another way is, look, realize that here we have tape diagrams implicit, right? These are tape diagrams because they show the lengths and compare. So this is 4 rectangles versus 5 and so on. Again, let's see here. So here you have, of course, quickly see that it's a half, right? If we go to our case, you would realize that this red strip is 1.5 of the yellow one. So it has to be a 50% growth. Or you could be saying a scaling of 150%. Namely, if you scale 4 by 150%, then it grows by 50%. So it's the same. So these numbers are equivalent. It's not the same to say 50 than 150, but it's the same to say 50% growth or scaling of 150%. In reverse is the same. So all these ways are very similar. But the last one is not. The last one is using that 1.5. What's the scaling factor from English to Spanish? So in reverse, you have to do the inverse. So 1 over 1.5. And of course, here would be an interesting discussion. Some students may not really know what's going on. So you could try to do a diagram to convince them that if you do the reverse, it's going to work. And of course, these arguments here are just showing that the reverse is what we do. For example, here we divide by 4, but here we multiply by 4, and so on. So that's part 1. Then you jump, but in another video we'll explore, you jump to these types of questions that are more deep. What do you do with this data that you collected? Okay, so you have a lot of numbers, a lot of growths, or right, increase or decrease that are relative. What do you do with that? What does it tell you? So see you in another video. Goodbye.